Good evening. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be doing something close to my heart. We're going to be talking about how to write an interview guide. Now, for those who don't know this aspect of my career, I did some research in the southern Indian Ocean on the island of Mauritius, which, if you've never heard of it, Google it, and you will find that it is an extremely beautiful place. And for this research that I was doing, I had to come up with a list of questions, an interview guide that I was going to ask people. And it was standardized so that I always made sure that I was getting the same information. And that was my first dive into social sciences research in a big way. And so we're going to be talking about some of those things today through the lens of an assignment. We're just going to rush through this because we're in a new semester and you can view these or pause to follow these things at your leisure. But I would just say that we have totally free appointments at the Online Writing Center. You can make up to 2 appointments per week with help with any writing assignment or writing task. So let's start by discussing some key terminology so we know and agree on what we're referring to with certain terms. So first off, let's differentiate between interview questions or prompts, things that you ask a research participant or someone who you're less formally trying to collect information from. A research questionnaire, which is referring to a list or set or a series of questions and prompts, also known as a research guide, that can be delivered as an online survey, a paper survey, questions you ask and you record the response, questions you ask and you transcribe the response, questions you ask and you summarize the responses, and a few more options as well. And we'll distinguish these things from the research questions, which are the larger questions that you're looking at, you're studying, you're analyzing the responses are designed to answer. So the interview questions, again, these are the things you're going to ask people directly. And the research questions are the things that you're going to use your answers to those and your study and analysis of those answers to be able to come up with a kind of bigger picture answer. So we'll also differentiate that from the research design, which is the larger way of examining not just what questions you're trying to answer, but what types of evidence you need to answer these questions, how can you get this data, and where would that data come from? Now, if you're asking interview questions, you're probably collecting data from people because it's not in a form or in the frequency or with the specificity that you're looking for, and that's quite all right. Now, when you're collecting qualitative data from people, you can do that with surveys or questionnaires, with interviews, structured or semi-structured. A structured interview, you take your interview guide and you ask exactly those questions, no more no less. Semi-structured allows you to ask follow-up to try and get richer details and drill into the whys a little bit more. Focus groups, where you gather a bunch of people and you give them question or prompts and they figure out how to answer them together, which will get you a different sort of information than if you're asking these individuals separately. Observations, where you're watching people at work and you're not asking or posing questions directly. Records or archival review. So for example, if you had a bunch of tapes of people discussing things, that would be more of a archival video review. All right, you'll see me refer to the APA course paper template in this and some other webinars. We have a YouTube channel where you can conveniently watch our videos on the go, and our blog also shows discussions of many topics of interest to writers. But we're going to dive in right now into this assignment from Como 475. This is coming from the week 3 of the persuasion class. And whatever you plan to do, persuasion is a good skill to have, to make known what you believe and why, to understand what others, and hopefully to come to a happy agreement that satisfies all parties. Now, if we were to just look at the instructions as a whole and the rubric, this is a lot. It's really small text on my screen here. So let's go ahead and break this down. And a good suggestion, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed looking at the instructions for assignment, break it down into smaller tasks. Because once we do that, we start to see that, oh, actually, the beginning of this is actually a preamble. And that's, about a quarter of the instructions on the left. That's the preamble kind of setting the stage. This assignment enables students to learn how to prepare for an interview with a target audience member to uncover attitudes, values, and beliefs concerning the PSA topic. So we see that there are certain specific things that we are aiming to get out of. And even though we have those specific questions, we want to make sure that they add up to answering these things that we want to know, the attitudes, values, and beliefs related to the topic. There's a guideline saying, hey, look at the readings of the teaching videos. And a note that we're not writing an essay here. You're not having to do detailed introductions to the questions to explain to the reader. You're coming up with a plan for how to conduct your interview. And that's mostly going to be by creating a list of questions, a little bit of instruction, and perhaps a prompt or two. Now, we see here we're moving into the assignment instructions proper. And this is a detailed list of things to do, say, and ask about. And this first one is a brief introduction to the key details that you have laid out. Then we have the text that you will say to the interviewee at the start, some questions that you're going to ask them to find out who they are and make sure that they're meet whatever check boxes you're looking to have checked off for your participants. And then we start diving into the questions. Now you can see that here, this is a detailed list where it's saying you need at least 3 topic areas and at least 3 questions for each of those. And then you don't want to just end the interview. It's nice to wrap things up, both for the participants, so that they could feel that they had a good experience sharing whatever information they were doing, that if you do need a follow-up, that you make sure that they're open to it. And, because their experience might be an important part in getting additional people to interview. Make sure that they understand what you are doing to protect their privacy through confidentiality and other measures. And just a reminder that everything should be written out in full sentences with appropriate grammar and punctuation. Now, then we have the rubric here. And you can see that the rubric is essentially saying, hey, everything that's listed in the instructions is actually important. So make sure you do those, because you won't get full credit if you don't do it, or if you only do part of the things mentioned. And so this marches through the different areas of analysis, reiterating that you need to have multiple questions and that theoretical focus is an important part of that, and that you include this introductory email. Now, this is easy to miss if you dive in without following the steps given at the beginning of the instructions or near the beginning instructions. So even though these are at the bottom, it's good to make sure that you state that at the beginning. All right, so this is the point where we go to the outlining and drafting. So if you haven't grabbed a copy of our course paper template, here's a great time to do that. So if you're watching on this video, you can go ahead and hit pause. Just as a reminder, if you need more information about APA Style, I highly recommend checking out the APA Style Central website. That's the third link here. You can also get a printed copy of the APA manual. Go to our website. And for information on citing sources, there's a handy-dandy webinar recording from the ACU online library about how to use Zotero to simplify some of the citation process and keeping track of multiple sources. All right, let's go grab that template. Now you should be able to see my screen in Microsoft Word now, and you can go ahead and fill in your information later. But we're going to start here by just pasting in the assignment instructions. So we have a full list of the things that we need to do in this paper. And starting off with this, we see a note to clearly label each section of your interview guide with the labels that are below that are bolded. So a great way to do this, to make sure that you are doing this very clearly, is just go ahead and take these and literally make them your headings. So here, because we're using a template, we can just add the APA style, and you see we have that section. Now, normally we wouldn't have an introduction heading, but because this is the interview guide and they have said that explicitly to have that heading, we're just going to go ahead and add it. You can see that I just have to select that and click on APA Level 1 heading. If you didn't see me do those other steps early, I'm just deleting this, adding a line break, selecting that, Styles pane, APA Level 1. Now, as we do this, it's helpful to also keep in mind what you can do to give yourself a clear list of things. So here we have this preliminary instruction. You'll need at least 3 topics that you organize questions around. And so we can add topic area 1, topic area 2, topic area 3, and then question 1, question 2, question 3, and then we can just reuse that. And now we can always add more questions, but we need at least 3 per area. And so we know as we add those in, we can put those in. And here, it's not a bad idea to just split these up into separate items. And so as you're drafting this, you might go ahead and use italics and say, thank you very much for meeting with me today, and anything else that goes there. Now, if you're reviewing this later and you want to double check with this, I'm going to review my notes. Do you mind if I contact you if I have any follow-up questions? And this way you are giving yourself a checkbox. And whatever you should say, these are just some examples here. Absolutely, this is a good one to do. What order you do these in, you might decide you want to have this wrap-up thing be at the end, or you might feel that that's helpful to have that before these. But certainly think about what you would like to hear as a listener. Now, demographic questions. If you're not sure, well, go back to your topic and say, who is your target audience and what questions would you want to do? So let's say that I was doing a PSA interview about the Chinese American community in Boston and ask. Now, that's not the only way to ask this. You could ask it in a way such as, whether you call it a survey for these interviews or something else. The important thing is that you clarify that there's a reason why you're doing this, so it doesn't seem very arbitrary or discriminatory. But we are vintage. And there will be a lot of personal preference, some of which will be about your comfort and preferences, perhaps some about theirs. But whatever your group is that you need to identify to collect information from, make sure you have questions for that. And it might be multiple questions because after all, this does say what demographic questions, plural. Now, this part here, some of this is probably going to be sentences where you're just making a statement. And this one here, because you're asking, that is definitely a question. So you can absolutely separate that out and say, whatever it is you're asking there. Now this one, to make sure that you get everything, it's helpful to break it up into individual items. And see, all right, individually, these are fairly short to do, but you want to make sure that you do that. And that might be as simple as and then state, are you asking to write during the interview? Are you asking to record and transcribe? Are you going to use a transcription service? Do you have a scribe in the room with you? these are all things that it's always polite and good research practice to ask for permission on things. All right, now up here, this is going to be a fairly straightforward set of things. As you do something like that, you can cross it off. But here we see a list of things to give. All right. And so write what those are. And I'm just going to model how that might be done. It can be as simple as chosen theory, and let's say we are using Leonard's 2020 theory of audience attention. All right, well, we've identified exactly what it is. It's good practice to have a reference entry that goes with that, but we want to identify the theory explicitly, and that tells us the information. Target audience, whatever group you're going to put there, PSA topic, and this can be as simple as this, where it's just the item and the description. Now, that's not the only way to do it. You could say my chosen theory is Leonard's 2020 theory of audience attention, and that gets the same information across. You can see that that is exactly 2 words more. It's functionally the same thing. So just make sure it's clear, and either of these is giving that information very clearly. Okay, so if you go through this, especially if you have an idea of what it is that you are exploring and why you picked that target audience, that'll make it a lot easier to answer the questions. And as indicated in the instructions, you can and should, if you have any concerns about what exactly should you be doing, remember, it says, see the readings and teaching videos, so that there are a lot of hints in there. And the goal is not to write a paper, it's to have a list of questions that will do the things that you need. So make sure you start with these instructions as a list of what you need to do. Make sure that the questions are written out in full sentences, and just go through and make sure you've done everything listed in the instructions and the rubric, and you should be good. All right, that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, to schedule an appointment by going to my.acu.edu and following the instructions, or my.acu.edu, selecting academic resources, online writing center, and following the instructions. And with that, I bid you good night.